and welcome to Ross Rides. Now, as the thumbnail will suggest, or pose the question at least, do I regret my choice of trading in the R1300GS for the F900GS? There's a short answer and a long answer, but before I get into either of them, if you could hit subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Your continued support or engagement is nice, and I long may it continue. Anyway, the short answer is no. Is it obviously no? Would I dare lie to myself and others that I'm pleased with my choice when I wasn't? I don't think I would. But I genuinely don't regret my choice for a handful of reasons. But there is one thing I miss from the bigger GS bikes that this doesn't have, which I'll also come on to. Now, as you'll see probably there, I've done 1,077 miles on that bike in a week and a half, averaged about 53 miles to the gallon, which is not too bad. It's had its running in service, which I posted yesterday, and all in all, it's been a fine experience. Changing the exhaust and removing the resonator box, which is just there, has definitely improved the drama around the bike and how it's breathing. You can feel that it breathes better as a motorcycle, and it's a bit more fun to ride about. The time I've had it, I will not lie that the 14-litre fuel tank is a vague pain in the ass over having the 1300 and the 1250. Although I will say I have previously had a couple of Harleys with peanut tanks, which you're lucky if you get 60, 70 miles out of that. So it's a mindset more than anything else. The bike itself has got the power where I want the power to be. Now, as I've said before, statistically, the 1300GS and the 1300 GSA are the best motorbikes money can buy. The data is what the data is. They do come up with a level of compromise, their cost, their weight, the polarizing opinion people might have about them, the ASA version of both of them. That ASA gearbox is fantastic. So my opinion on this, whilst getting rid of the 1300 for me doesn't detract getting rid of it to purchase that. But the usable power I found on that bike is you can ride it enthusiastically, let's call it that, and you're not doing silly speeds. But what is interesting, I rode that back on the coast road last Saturday, and the bike had done 300 miles, 400 miles at that point, and I got rid of my chicken strips on a brand new bike, which I've never done. Now that could be confidence, that could be the conditions were right, could be 100 different reasons, but I've never ridden a bike on that road like I rode the 900GS, and I've taken Harleys up there, I've taken my 1250, my 1300, the Monster, and many bikes in between on that road, but none of them, for me at least, and how my style of riding, handled like the F900GS. From a comfort perspective, my 1250, I had a low chassis, low seat. That was far and away the most comfortable bike I've had. I feel the 1300 wasn't particularly comfortable compared to the 1250, and the narrower seat on the F900, I would put that akin to the 1300. So from a comfort perspective, it's parallel. The bit I wish that I had that bike is I wish it had the holding brake that the big GSs have had, because when you're a little leg like me and I'm not flat-footed, if I'm at a hill or an awkward junction, being able to put that brake on is definitely a big advantage, and I do miss that. But that's about it. Today I took this bike out for a sort of a ride deliberately before doing this video. Now, for those that live in England, or particularly southwest, I went from just north of Bristol, and I'll put a map on the screen so you can see the route I took. Went just north of Bristol to Portishead, to Clevedon, to Weston-super-Mare, all along the coast road, then over to Cheddar Gorge and then through Cheddar, then to Bristol Airport, then to Clifton, then to Westbury-on-Trim, and then back on the M5. About 80-90 miles I think it was, and over 3 hours of riding. And I didn't have any anxiety of running out of fuel. The temperature was between 10 and 12 degrees and a bit rainy in places. And I wasn't wearing all my gear. I just had motorbike jeans on, but not waterproofs. I had summer gloves, which I wore all last year as well. These super light gloves. And the bike handled it fine. I wasn't cold particularly. I wasn't wet particularly. Because that's normal riding, right? Everyone's saying, oh, I need a big GS to go touring. And that's probably true once or twice a year. But the rest of the time, particularly when we get into autumn and winter, it's going to be rides like today. 3 hours, 80 miles in less than ideal conditions. And for me, the F900 handled it perfectly. Now, if it had a bigger GS, would I be more comfortable and drier? Probably. But not for the 10 grand extra that the 1300 costs over that. Now, what I will say, the difference between 1300 and the 1250, and that is on the 1300, if it was particularly wet, the backs of my legs would get wet with water flicking up. The 1250 didn't do that, and the 900 doesn't do that. So that is something, at least if you're riding without all the waterproofs on, as a consideration on the weather. The only thing I feel like I'd like to change also on the 900 is the handguards. That I feel they sit a little bit low, so there isn't all the protection I would like on cold days like today. And that's about it. I don't see that the 1300 in either carnations, and frankly a 1250, I suppose by that train of thought, is worth the extra money for 99% of the riding most people will do. Now, I've got some very long rides planned on that next year, so we'll see how it truly stacks up. But what I will say, and I'll put a link to another YouTube channel here, this is my cousin's YouTube channel, it's all in Danish, so if you speak Danish, watch his channel. But he rides properly off-road, he does the Tet quite a lot and other bits and bobs, and he's just got rid of his GSA for a T7. Now, so in true off-roading, he found his GSA was just more bike than he needed, too heavy, cumbersome, etc. He wanted a traditional fork setup. So I think that unless you're going to travel to Portugal or Spain or France once a year in the summer, for that rest of the year riding, a lighter, more manageable bike maybe has to be the choice. Or if you've got enough money, have both. So if you are considering a 1300, as you should, it's amazing, take a 900 out and really think about your day-to-day user case of how you're going to use that bike. Because pound for pound, I don't think the 1300 wins if you take out just the statistics. Now, maybe the T7, I mean, this has got a bit more power, so again, it's maybe the world, or maybe just me and my view on it is we've flirted with the big heavyweights and now we're going to the middleweight bikes, particularly if you're my height, so 5'8" and 13.5, 14 stone. I don't want a big heavy bike, because I know I've dropped my 1250 before and it was a pain in the ass to pick up. I dropped that last week and it wasn't. And those things matter, right? Moving it about in this tiny garage, I've got 2 motorbikes. It's just easier. And with that, if you could hit subscribe, that'd be appreciated. And stay safe out there. Cheers.